Oakland, California, December 1964, a bitter winter afternoon that would quietly reshape the history of martial arts. Behind the locked doors of a modest kung fu school on Broadway Street, two men stood across from each other. One of them was Bruce Lee. The other was Wong, a traditional kung fu master representing San Francisco's Chinatown. What unfolded inside that room over the next 8 minutes was meant to be buried forever. But the truth has a way of surfacing, and this particular truth reveals more about Bruce Lee than anything he ever said publicly. This is the story he never wanted the world to hear. It began 3 days before the fight. Bruce Lee was running his Jun Fan Kung Fu Institute in Oakland. He was only 24 years old, but he had already created serious waves in the martial arts world. He was doing something that many considered unforgivable. He was opening his kung fu classes to non-Chinese students. In 1964, this was not just controversial, it was seen as a direct betrayal of Chinese cultural tradition. For generations, Chinese martial arts had been kept strictly within Chinese communities. The fighting systems were treated as sacred knowledge, not meant for outsiders. Bruce Lee rejected that idea completely. He believed that truth belonged to everyone, regardless of nationality or background. This belief made him dangerous in the eyes of powerful people. The traditional kung fu community in San Francisco's Chinatown had been watching him closely. They saw his mixed classes, his Western students, his unconventional teaching approach, and their patience ran out. Have you ever been so committed to doing the right thing that others treated it like a crime? That feeling of being punished for progress is exactly what Bruce Lee was living through in those days. On December 1st, a young messenger arrived at Bruce's school while a class was in session. He was dressed in traditional Chinese clothing, maybe 19 years old. He walked in without greeting anyone, placed an envelope in Bruce's hand, and left without speaking a single word. Bruce opened it in front of his students. The letter, written in formal Chinese characters, carried a clear and direct message from the San Francisco martial arts community. Bruce Lee was violating the ancient codes of conduct. He was dishonoring Chinese martial arts by sharing them with foreigners. He had to stop. If he refused, a formal challenge would be issued. Bruce read the letter once, then he read it again, then he laughed. Not nervously, not awkwardly, but genuinely, like a man who had just been handed confirmation of something he already knew. He folded the letter, slipped it into his pocket, and returned to teaching his class without another word about it. But his students noticed that for the rest of that session, his movements were sharper, more deliberate, more intense. Something had shifted inside him. 2 days later, on December 3rd, Wong arrived in Oakland. He was not a messenger. He was the real thing. Trained in the classical styles of Northern Shaolin, he was in his late 20s, tall for a Chinese man, lean and precise in his movements. In Chinatown, he had a reputation as a serious and honorable fighter. He was known for speed, technical discipline, and a deep respect for traditional forms. The elders of the martial arts community had specifically chosen him to deliver their final message to Bruce Lee, not because he was aggressive, but because he was principled. Wong arrived at exactly 4:00 in the afternoon with 5 other martial artists from San Francisco. They entered the school without knocking. Bruce was in the middle of a private lesson. He stopped the moment he saw them walk in. The room went still. Bruce's student quietly stepped aside, reading the situation without being told. Wong moved forward and spoke in Cantonese, formally and without emotion. He explained that Bruce had been warned and had chosen to ignore that warning. The only remaining resolution was a formal challenge match. The terms were straightforward. If Bruce won, he could teach whoever he wanted. If Wong won, Bruce would have to shut his school and end his practice of teaching non-Chinese students. No rules, traditional challenge format. The fight would continue until one man could no longer go on. Bruce did not flinch. He looked at Wong glanced at the 5 men standing behind him and checked his watch. He responded calmly, also in Cantonese. He said he needed 2 days to clear his schedule. Come back Saturday, December 5th at 2 in the afternoon. Wong agreed, Saturday at 2. Then the group left as quietly as they had arrived. After the room emptied, one of Bruce's students asked him if he was scared. Bruce turned to him and said something that stayed with that student for the rest of his life. Worried? No, but I am going to learn something important on Saturday. either about him or about myself. Bruce did not publicize the challenge. He did not gather a crowd or seek attention. He simply prepared. On Thursday and Friday, his wife Linda noticed that his training looked completely different. No flashy combinations, no complex forms, just fundamentals, punches, footwork, timing, repeated over and over. He was preparing for something that mattered. Linda asked him if he was nervous. He told her he was not worried about the outcome. He was focused on what the fight would reveal. He knew Wong Man was a genuinely skilled fighter. He knew this would be nothing like sparring demonstrations. This was going to be a real test. Friday night, Bruce barely slept, not out of fear, but because his mind would not stop running scenarios. Saturday morning came cold and overcast. Bruce woke early, stretched lightly, ate a small meal. He asked Linda to stay home. He did not want her there. This was going to be serious. He arrived at the school at 1:30, unlocked the door alone, moved the equipment to the sides of the room, and cleared a wide open space in the center. Then he waited. At 2 o'clock exactly, Wong Man returned. He brought the same 5 martial artists and 2 additional men, older, clearly senior masters from the traditional community. Bruce had invited no one. When he saw the group filling his school, he understood immediately. This was not just a personal challenge. It was a public declaration. The traditional community wanted witnesses. They wanted evidence. Bruce did not object. He simply gestured for them to come in and take their places along the walls. Then, at the last moment, 3 of Bruce's own students appeared at the door. They had somehow heard about what was happening. They asked if they could stay. Bruce looked at them for a moment, then nodded. If there were witnesses on one side, there would be witnesses on both. 10 people stood against those walls that afternoon. 10 people who would later remember the same 8 minutes in completely different ways. Wong Man stepped into the center of the room, removed his jacket to reveal a simple black training uniform, and began warming up with traditional stretches and forms. Every movement was controlled and textbook perfect. Bruce Lee did not warm up. He stood at the far end of the space and watched, still and focused, reading every detail of the way Wong Man moved. One of Bruce's students later said Bruce looked different that afternoon. Not tense, not eager. Just calm in a way that felt almost unsettling. When Wong Man finished and settled into his traditional northern Shaolin stance, he gave a short nod. Bruce nodded back. One of the senior masters spoke. He outlined the agreed-upon restrictions: no eye strikes, no groin attacks, no throat strikes, and announced that the match would continue until submission or incapacity. Both men confirmed their agreement. There was no referee, no signal, no countdown. The master simply said one word: begin. For several seconds, neither man moved. They circled slowly, calculating the distance between them, searching for information. Wong Man held a clean, balanced classical stance, hands poised for both offense and defense. Bruce's position was lower, more fluid, constantly shifting, not matching any recognized traditional form. It was something he was still in the process of building. Then Wong Man attacked first. A sharp, controlled, straight punch aimed at Bruce's chest, a testing strike designed to measure his opponent's reflexes. Bruce slipped it without difficulty, moving just enough for it to pass his shoulder. He did not counter. He simply reset and kept circling. Wong Man came again, this time with a combination. A high punch followed immediately by a low kick, a classic technique meant to divide attention. Bruce covered the punch and checked the kick. Still no counter. Still just reading. The traditional masters along the wall gave subtle approving nods. Wong Man's technique was precise and correct, but Bruce's students were noticing something different. Bruce was not simply defending. His eyes were locked on Wong Man's center of gravity, tracking every microshift in weight, every tell that preceded movement. Wong Man pushed harder, launching faster and more complex combinations, advancing steadily, trying to force Bruce into the kind of mistake that comes from pressure. Bruce gave ground, moving back, his defense tight and calm. From the outside, it may have looked like Bruce was struggling to keep up, but then everything changed. Bruce stopped retreating. It happened without warning. Wong Man threw the same straight punch he had been landing cleanly in the combinations, but this time Bruce did not slip or block. He intercepted it, shooting his hand forward to trap Wong Man's wrist at the moment of extension. In the same motion, Bruce stepped inside his guard and was suddenly at close range with nowhere for Wong Man to deploy his techniques. What followed was fast enough that witnesses would argue about it for the next 50 years. Bruce fired a rapid chain of straight punches into Wong Man's body and head, short, direct, and without wasted motion. Not wide swings, not theatrical strikes, just economical, targeted force from a distance of inches. Wong Man tried to create space, to reset to the range where his training gave him the advantage, but Bruce followed every attempt, staying close, cutting off angles, refusing to give him room to breathe. The traditional masters shifted along the wall. This was not how a formal challenge match was supposed to look. There was meant to be an exchange of classical technique, a display of form and discipline. What they were watching instead looked like a controlled street confrontation. Wong Man did not panic. He adjusted. He began using lateral footwork instead of retreating straight back, throwing quick kicks to try to buy distance. But Bruce adapted with him. Every time Wong Man attempted to establish his preferred range, Bruce collapsed it again. Every time he set up a traditional combination, Bruce interrupted it before it could form. One of the traditional masters would later say that watching Bruce Lee fight was like watching water. He had no fixed shape. He simply moved into whatever space his opponent left unguarded. Around the 3-minute mark, Wong Man made a decision. Standing and trading was not going to work. He dropped low and shot in for a takedown, grabbing for Bruce's legs. It was not part of Northern Shaolin training. It was survival. Bruce sprawled immediately, spreading his base and dropping his weight to deny the takedown. He wrapped around Wong Man's upper body and began driving short hammering strikes to the back of his head and neck. Wong Man released and tried to create separation, but as he backed away, Bruce pursued him without hesitation. The chase that followed pushed both men around the entire room. Wong Man moved, Bruce cut angles. Equipment was knocked aside. Witnesses pressed flat against the walls to stay out of the way. One of Bruce's students later described this phase as frightening. He said it stopped looking like a fight between two martial artists and started looking like something else entirely. Wong Man threw everything he had left. Spinning techniques, jumping kicks, desperate combinations. Some of them connected, but they did not change Bruce's pace. Bruce's returns were shorter, more direct, and kept accumulating damage in a way that individual counters could not answer. Around the 5-minute mark, Wong Man began to slow visibly. His movements became heavier, his footwork less precise. Exhaustion was doing what his opponent's technique could not do alone. Then his back touched the wall, and he had no more room to move. Bruce was directly in front of him, blocking every exit. He loaded up for a finishing sequence. At that moment, one of the senior traditional masters stepped forward and called out in Cantonese. He said enough had been proven, and there was no need to continue. Bruce stopped. He looked at the master who had spoken. Wong Man, still against the wall, also looked. His expression mixed relief with something that looked very much like shame. The master moved into the space between them. He said the challenge had been answered. He said the traditional community had seen what they came to see. The fight was over, but then Bruce said no. He looked directly at Wong Man, bypassing the master entirely, and asked him in Cantonese whether he could continue. Wong Man, exhausted and against the wall, stood up straighter. He nodded. He could continue. The master tried to intervene again. Bruce told him calmly that this was between the two of them. Wong Man moved back to the center of the room. His arms were shaking. Bruce waited for him to settle into position before doing anything. He did not rush in. He let Wong Man prepare. That patience was not kindness alone. It was respect. The room held its breath. Wong Man attacked one last time, a committed lunging punch with whatever force he had remaining. Bruce slipped it, trapped the arm, and swept his legs. Wong Man went down hard on the wooden floor. Bruce followed him down into a controlling position, ready to finish, but he did not. He looked at Wong Man below him and asked, "Are you finished?" There was a pause. Some witnesses later said Wong Man verbally submitted. Others said he simply stopped moving and turned his face away, but every single witness agreed that the fight was done. Bruce stood up. He was breathing hard, soaked in sweat. Wong Man got to his feet slowly with help from one of his companions. The room stayed silent. One of the senior masters walked toward Bruce, stopped, and bowed deeply. He said in Cantonese that Bruce had proven his point and that the traditional community would not challenge him again. Bruce did not return the bow. He said, "I did not prove my point. I proved that I have a great deal left to learn." Everyone in the room stared at him. He had just won a formal challenge match decisively. What was there to learn? Bruce looked at his own hands, opening and closing them. He said that the fight had taken far too long. It should have ended in seconds. His techniques had been inefficient. His conditioning had gaps. If Wong Jackman had been carrying a weapon, if there had been multiple opponents, the outcome might have been very different. Jackman, still recovering against the far wall, looked at Bruce with an expression he could not quite hide. He had just been beaten, and his opponent was dissecting his own performance like a coach watching game footage. But Bruce was completely serious. The fight had exposed real problems in his approach. He had been reactive when he should have been decisive. He had pursued when he should have been finishing. The energy he spent in that room was far more than the situation should have required. That awareness, that refusal to let a win feel like enough, is what separated Bruce Lee from almost everyone else who ever put on a training uniform. The traditional masters left quietly, taking Wong Jackman and the other witnesses with them. Bruce's students lingered for a moment. One of them asked if Bruce was satisfied with winning. He sat down heavily in a chair instead of answering right away. Then he said that starting Monday, everything was going to change. They would train differently. They would think differently. He said the fight had shown him that traditional techniques were too complex for real confrontations. What was needed was something simpler, more direct, more honest. His students did not fully grasp what he meant that afternoon, but they would understand in the years ahead. The principles Bruce began developing after December 1964 would eventually become what he called Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. No fixed forms, no loyalty to style, only what works, stripped of everything that does not. After everyone left, Bruce locked the school and stood alone in the middle of the room. The space was a mess. Equipment scattered, furniture out of place, scuff marks on the walls where Wong Jackman had been cornered during the chase. Bruce did not move any of it. He stood there and ran the fight through his mind from beginning to end, not looking for moments to feel proud of, looking for every moment he could have done better. He understood something that afternoon that many people go their entire lives without understanding. A real fight does not care about your resume. It does not care about your credentials or how many years you trained or how impressive your forms look. Only function matters. And many of the techniques he had been teaching, techniques rooted in traditional Wing Chun, had not functioned the way they needed to under real pressure. That realization was both freeing and uncomfortable. Freeing because it gave him permission to explore. Uncomfortable because it meant letting go of things he had spent years developing. Most people would have taken the win and called it a good day. Bruce took the win and called it a problem to solve. When Linda arrived at the school that evening, she found him sitting in the dark, still in his training clothes, not moving. She asked how it had gone. He told her he had won. There was no celebration in his voice. She asked what was wrong. He said that he had won today, but that someday he might face someone faster, stronger, better prepared, and at his current level that outcome was not guaranteed. And that was not something he was willing to accept. From that point, his approach to training transformed completely. He began studying biomechanics, kinesiology, Western boxing, fencing, wrestling, and anything else that could make his movement more efficient and his results more reliable. The fight with Wong Jackman had humbled him in a way that victory almost never does. Think about how rare that is. How often do people win something and immediately ask themselves what they did wrong? That question is the difference between someone who peaks early and someone who keeps growing. In the weeks that followed, different versions of the story began circulating through the martial arts community. Wong Jackman's account described the fight as essentially unresolved. He said it had been stopped by the masters before any clear conclusion was reached. He pointed out that Bruce had used grappling, which fell outside the agreed-upon parameters of a traditional challenge match. Several of the traditional witnesses backed this version. They said both fighters had demonstrated skill and that no definitive outcome had been established. Bruce's students told a completely different story. They said the fight had been one-sided from early on, that Wong Jackman had been overwhelmed, that the ending had been absolute. Bruce himself almost never discussed it publicly. When the subject came up, he would redirect the conversation. But in private, with close students and trusted friends, he would occasionally mention December 1964 as the fight that fundamentally changed him, not because of the result, because of what it exposed. The honest account, drawn from all 10 witnesses, likely sits somewhere between those two versions. Bruce did win. Wong Jackman ended the fight on the floor and unable to continue. That part is not seriously disputed, but it was not the clean, dominant performance that some accounts suggested. Wong Jackman landed strikes. He made Bruce work. The fight lasted 7 to 8 minutes, and by Bruce's own standard, that was a failure. For a fighter of his caliber, against a single opponent, it should have been a matter of seconds. Why did different witnesses remember it so differently? Some point to ego and loyalty. People reconstruct events to match what they already believe and who they already support. Others point to the speed and chaos of real fighting. When adrenaline takes over and the action is fast and close, accurate memory becomes unreliable. But there is a third possibility that very few people have considered. Perhaps the conflicting versions exist because Bruce Lee specifically asked for them. 3 days after the fight, Bruce requested a private meeting with Wong Jackman. Only one other person was present, a mutual contact who had helped arrange it. According to that witness, Bruce approached the meeting not as a victor talking to the defeated, but as one martial artist to another. He told Wong Jackman that he respected his skill and his willingness to show up. Then he made an unusual request. He asked Wong Jackman not to share the specific details of how the fight had ended. He suggested that the story remain ambiguous, open to interpretation, something that reasonable people could disagree about. Wong Jackman asked him why. Bruce explained his reasoning plainly. If word spread through the martial arts community that he had completely dismantled Wong Jackman, it would make him a permanent target. Every traditional master looking to make a name would want to test him. There would be no end to the challenges. But beyond that, Bruce said he had no interest in damaging Wong Jackman's reputation. Wong Jackman had accepted the challenge honorably, had fought honestly, and had faced a difficult outcome with dignity. That deserved respect, not public humiliation. Bruce told him that a story with no clear winner, one where different witnesses remembered different things, would serve both of them. The traditional community could preserve their standing. Bruce could avoid becoming a constant proving ground, and the deeper lesson that martial arts needed to evolve could be developed quietly without public controversy pulling at it from every direction. Wong Jackman agreed. No document was ever signed. No formal arrangement was made. It was simply an understanding between two men who had tested each other and come out of it with something more valuable than a record of who had won. This is why the conflicting accounts exist to this day. Not because the witnesses were lying, but because Bruce Lee deliberately built ambiguity into the story to protect the dignity of his opponent and the space he needed to do his real work. No film was ever made of the fight. No photographs exist. What we have are the memories of 10 witnesses shaped by time, perspective, and loyalty, but the impact of that afternoon cannot be questioned. After December 1964, Bruce Lee stopped thinking in terms of martial arts styles entirely. He stopped teaching Wing Chun as a system and began teaching principles instead. Directness, simplicity, efficiency, economy of motion. He trained harder than before and questioned everything more deeply. The physical capability that would later stun audiences around the world, the speed, the precision, the power, did not emerge from natural gifts alone. It was built deliberately and obsessively on the foundation of lessons that a modest school in Oakland forced him to face. Wong Jackman continued teaching traditional kung fu after the fight, but those who trained with him in later years noted that he had become less rigid in his thinking, more open to the idea that effectiveness mattered alongside tradition. He never fought Bruce Lee again. The two men were never close, but they maintained a respectful distance from that point forward. When Bruce Lee died in July 1973, Wong Jackman attended the funeral. He stood before the casket, bowed formally, and offered a prayer in Cantonese. Someone nearby asked him what he had said. He answered that he was thanking Bruce for the lesson he had taught him about his own limitations. So what is the real story that Bruce Lee never wanted to reach the public? It was not the fight itself. The fight happened, people witnessed it, stories were told. The true hidden element was what Bruce took from it. He learned that traditional martial arts, as they were being practiced and taught in 1964, were not built for real confrontations. He learned that technique must serve function, not the other way around. He learned that preserving tradition for its own sake was not a virtue if it came at the cost of truth. But deeper than all of that, he learned that defeating another person is far simpler than confronting your own limitations. Wong Man was never his real opponent. His own satisfaction with where he already was, that was the real threat, and the fight forced him to see it clearly. Most of us never face a formal challenge match, but that feeling, the quiet certainty that you are already good enough, that you have worked hard enough, that you deserve a break from improving, that is something almost everyone carries at some point. Bruce Lee felt it, and then he chose to fight it just as hard as he fought anything else. The match lasted 8 minutes. The lessons it produced lasted the rest of his life. Bruce Lee did not want this story told because he wanted people focused on what came after it, not on the event itself. He wanted the attention on Jeet Kune Do, on the philosophy of relentless self-examination, on the idea that the strongest fighter is not the one with the most techniques, but the one who never stops asking how to be better. The fight was just the beginning of that question. The work that followed was the answer.